And now for the exciting conclusion, part 2, making the squat rack. Welcome back to our shop and part 2 of making the squat rack. Here we're back on the table. We got the uprights laying down and we're setting up to weld on the offsets or the standoffs. Now these 2-inch by 2-inch pieces of tube, we're welding them to these uprights, and then they're going to go back to the wall brackets, the hinge, and that's what's going to hold it off the wall, and that's what's going to hinge it back flat against the wall when you're not using it. So we take a little bit of time. We want to make sure that they're nice and straight and square before we weld them up. So once we figure out where they need to be, we tack them up and then we weld them on up. We like to do them side by side like this for a couple of reasons. One, we get them exactly in the same spot on each piece. Two, it makes it easier to weld them out. We do it more like an assembly line process. They're both sitting right here, right in front of us. We weld one piece, move on to the next one, so on and so forth. And here's what they look like when they're done. Here we're working on the J-cups. That's 5/8 solid rod that we had taken and cut a hole in those J-cups. That rod goes all the way through, and then we plug weld it on the front side, tack weld it on the back, and that makes it super strong. So there we were just cleaning up those J-cups. Here we got a sheet of 10 gauge on the table, and we're cutting out the wall brackets. There's going to be 4 of these. Each corresponding wall bracket is going to attach to one of those standoffs, those 2-inch by 2-inch standoffs via the hinge. That's where this whole thing will pivot back against the wall. So that's the table just going to work, cutting out those wall brackets, doing what it does best. Every so often when we're cutting, you'll see us poke our heads in there and look at something. What we're doing is making sure that one of the cutout pieces hasn't fallen into that water table and is sticking up and going to get in the way of that torch. Because it doesn't care if something's in the way, it'll just plow right through it and end up breaking a gear on one of the motors or something. Here we got a piece of 1/4 inch on the table, and we're making the hinges or the hinge brackets that are going to be welded to those wall plates where this whole thing's going to hinge off of. And it hinges using a 1/2 inch bolt. Works out really good for us. You'll see us holding it down, and that's not because the piece is going to jump off the table, but sometimes that torch, if it drags on that piece a little bit, it can move the whole piece and then the cut's going to be off. So those small pieces, we just hold them down to make sure nothing gets in the way or nothing gets moved. And we're back at the bench and our magnetic clamp, and we're just cleaning up all those pieces that we just cut out on the table, knocking the dross off, and then just knocking the edges down a little bit with the angle grinder. There really isn't a whole lot of cleanup work to do, but there is a little bit, and this is where we take care of it. That magnetic clamp that we have built into that corner of the bench or our table works really good. It's such a time saver. So we got all those pieces cleaned up, and here we are back at the other corner of our table, and we're setting up those hinges to weld onto those wall plates. Now it's real important that we get these hinges nice and square and straight on those wall plates to make it really easy to install. Again, we just get it tacked up, and once we get it tacked up to where we want it, then we just start welding away, melting steel. So what we're doing here is we make these brackets, these little hooks, if you will, that we weld onto those standoffs, and what those allow the end user to do is, one, when it's folded against the wall, that top bar that pins the two uprights together, that gives it a place to hang, and on the other side it gives you the place to hang your bar, your bench press bar, your squat bar, just to keep it nice and tidy and give it a place to keep your stuff. So minus the actual weights, this folding squat rack system is all encompassing. Everything that you need to make this thing work will stay on it when it's either folded up against the wall or folded out. Now just prepping these pieces for a primer before we get ready to paint them. And to prep them, we just mask anything off that needs to be masked off and wipe everything down with acetone. Get all the oil and grease off of them, and we'll sand them down a little bit if we need to. And that's about it. The primer that we use is a black rust reformer type primer. So if there's any rust on any of the metal, which sometimes there is, there's a chemical reaction in there that transforms that rust into paintable steel. And because we're doing black top coat over this, the black primer is a no-brainer. It makes it super easy to top coat. And this stuff dries super quick. It's probably 100 degrees in the shop today. So this primer, it's dry within about 5 minutes. Now here we're mixing up the black paint to paint these uprights and those standoffs. Now this is a DTM style, direct to metal, high gloss black paint, and we thin it with acetone. It's not a two-part paint. It's really designed to be painted straight out of the can, but for our HVLP system, it's too thick. So we thin it down with acetone. That does a couple things for us. One, that makes it easy for me to say, right? Makes it easier to paint. And two, it makes the paint go a little bit further because we mix it about 60% paint, 40% acetone. So thinning the paint, that 1 gallon of paint actually will go a little bit further than if we were just using it straight out of the can. And it leaves a real nice finish. It's super durable. It's an industrial grade, direct to metal paint. Works real good for us. So while all that stuff is drying, I'm just taking some Delron. This is some 1/4 inch thick Delron, and I'm making these pieces, these plates. These are going to go on the J cups. So when you put your bar back into the J cup, one, it's not metal to metal. This is a little bit softer, a little bit nicer for your bar, a little bit nicer for our system. All in all, it just works out much, much better with this stuff. As you can see here, I cut those bottom pieces wrong. Just that 90 degree, just doesn't fit in there right, and I didn't like it. So scratch those. Those go in the should have been, and we cut some new ones, put them in there, and they work out good. So just knocking off the sharp edges of those, getting ready to glue to those J cups. It seems like I use that angle grinder a lot for sanding or sizing, and the honest answer to that is I do, because it works real good and super fast. to the chop saw, and this time we're taking some 3/4 inch plywood and we're cutting some pieces that are going to insert in the bottom of those 3" by 3" tubes. And then I'd taken and cut some Delron already to about 3.5 by 3.5, if I remember right. I'm going to screw those 3/4 inch plywood pieces to that Delron, and that's going to go in the bottom of those tubes. And that's actually what's going to drag on the floor or sit on the floor when you're folding that thing open and close. Now to our upright belt sander, just to knock the edges off. Round those corners a little bit, finish them off real nice. So here you can see how those pieces fit in the bottom of those tubes. Now I cut them so they fit pretty tight, but then I just drill one simple little hole on each side and add a little set screw, if you will. Now for that pull-up bar, we take and we put hockey stick tape. We wrap the whole bar with that just to give it a little extra grip. And if the end user, if they don't like it, they can take it off pretty simply, but it works out real nice. So there it is, I screwed it to the wall. It simply just unfolds. Put those red handled pins in, add your J-cups, give it a go. And then to put it back against the wall, just reverse the whole process. You can see how that pull-up bar will hang in those hooks. That's me simulating squat bar. There it is out. There it is in. That's it. Thanks for watching.